the third day. This is the third day of inter-faculty, schools, centers, student debates for 2020, academic year 2020, organized by the NUSSA executive. We're going to go right into our topic, which is religious monotanga should not be a requirement for election candidacy. Religious monotanga should not be a requirement for election candidacy. You pretty much, all of you know the rules, but I'm going to refresh your mind in case you've forgotten. Each speaker is allowed to speak for 3 minutes, except your final speaker, who will be given 5 minutes for your summary. On my left side is our official timekeeper, Sungatavita Aukuso Ropati from the School of Nursing, who will give you the first signal with that first signal to let you know that you have 1 minute left. And then the second signal is ringing the bell to tell you wherever you're at with your word or sentence, you stop. Your time is up. We have our panel of judges, as you can see, and they've been given the marking criteria for judging the debating teams. And on my left, it is Sunga Martin Carey. He is the director of our Governance, Policy, and Planning Division. In the middle, or right next to him, to his right, to his left, is Avalongo Tongi Tofa Avalongo Tongi Tunupopo, our chief librarian. And to my right is Sunga Rooney Mariner, lecturer with the Faculty of Arts. The language of the debate is English. And to remind our judges and teams, no new points will be made in your summaries. Should you not heed this condition, then the new point will not be counted and your team may be penalized. Okay, I'm now very happy to introduce our debating teams. On my right is the affirmative side, representing the School of Medicine. Would you introduce yourselves, please?
Tala Falava. My name is Alicia Levi, and I'm the first speaker of the affirmative side, representing the School of Medicine. Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our Madam Chairperson, panel of judges, our opponents, as well as the audience and timekeeper. Tala Falava. My name is Senorita Teto Ave, and I will be the second speaker representing School of Medicine.
Thank you.
Tarofa Oloingoa EJ Faolo. I'll be presenting third speaker of School of Medicine.
Thank you, affirmative side. I turn to the negative side on my left, representing TVET. Would you introduce your team, please?
First of all, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the panel of judges, Madam Chairwoman, the timekeeper, formidable opponents, as well as the spectators for today's debate. My name is Anthony Mulpola, and I will be representing the Faculty of TVET by way of Diploma of Office Management, and we will be on the negative side for the topic, religious montanga should not be a requirement for election candidacy.
Thank you.
Before I introduce myself, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our judges, our Madam Chairwoman, and our timekeeper, and as well as our fellow spectators and our fellow opponents. My name is Esther Key, and I will be your speaker number 2, representing the TVET under the Diploma of Office Management. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to acknowledge the panel of judges, Madam Chairperson, timekeeper, affirmative team, and the audience. My name is Jolene Hea Tangatauli, and I'll be your third speaker for representing the TVET for Diploma in Office Management. Thank you.
Thank you very much, negative team. Just to help our debating teams, the topic is stated in a negative form, okay? Religious monotanga should not be a requirement for election candidates, should not, and that is supported by the affirmative side, but not supported by the negative side, just in case you get confused, okay? Just a little help from the chair. Without further ado, I wish you both teams good luck, and I now call on the first speaker of the affirmative side to present your side's case.
Greetings, honorable judges, Madam Chairperson, timekeeper, members of the audience, and our opposing team. We are the affirmative team supporting the moot of the day. Religious monotanga should not be a requirement for election candidacy. I'm the first speaker, and I'll be speaking on legislations governing the issue at hand. Our second speaker will highlight reasons for separation of what is cultural and religious monotanga, and our final speaker will argue on political philanthropy. Firstly, we have to define and understand what is meant by religious monotanga. Religious monotanga refers to monetary contributions or intangible goods to the church. It is one of the two types of monotanga existing, the other being cultural monotanga, which raises the following question: what is a monotanga? Monotanga is defined under legislation and pursuant to the Electoral Act of 2019 as the compulsory service, assistance, or contribution in form of cash, in-kind, or goods rendered for customary, traditional, events, functions, or similar purposes pursuant to the customs of a particular village. In other words, monotanga simply relates to cultural and traditional services. Nothing in the definition of monotanga relates to religious contributions or religious services. Therefore, religious monotanga is simply not legislated in law and cannot be enforced as a reason for eligibility requirements. Religious monotanga appears to have been used for the purposes of election. According to an interview by the Election Commissioner, the religious monotanga was only included in the Principal Electoral Act of 1963 in an amendment done in 2015. It was amended to satisfy the monotanga requirements of the law for urban constituencies during the election of 2016. Most of the candidates who vied for the urban seats used their matai titles from outside of the urban constituency's borders. So their monotanga from those matai titles could not be used within the urban boundaries, hence the reason why the religious monotanga was included. However, the Electoral Act of 2019, which has repealed the Act of 1963, has dissolved the urban sections and clearly sets out the new electoral boundaries, or tua oyo tu malo palota, which is why it is only appropriate to revert back to the original status of the law as it was in 1963.
You have 1 minute.
So with the new electoral boundaries set out under the Electoral Act of 2019, religious monotanga has been dissolved or done away with, which means religious monotanga is not enforceable, it is not legislated, and is not required under the law, which supports our argument that it should not be a requirement for election candidacy.
Thank you. I call on the first speaker of the negative side for your presentation and rebuttal.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chairwoman. Once again, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the judges, Madam Chairwoman, as well as the audience for today. To rebut on the first speaker's first topic, the religious monotanga requirement is still valid after the individual voter's seat, otherwise known as the urban constituency, now known as the electoral constituency. This is to accommodate the unfair playing field for potential candidates whom have no matai titles within their electoral constituencies, or matais whom, according to their cultural requirements, based on their paramount titles, are unable to give monotanga, but however do give religious monotanga. This also brings me to my first point. Cultural monotanga and religious monotanga are two pillars of service that go together. In the Electoral Act 1963, Part 2, labeled Qualifications of Members, Section 3, Subsection 3A, as well as the Electoral Amendment Act 2019 under the second section, Interpretation, within Part 1, Preliminary, monotanga is defined as the compulsory service, assistance, or contribution, such as contribution in form of cash, kind, or goods, rendered for customary, traditional, or religious activities, events, functions, or similar purposes, pursuant to the customs of a particular village. This is evidence written and solidified on paper, going to show that cultural and religious monotanga go hand in hand with each other. However, according to the new amendments made to the Electoral Act 2019, election candidate eligibility rules have clearly removed the appendage and religious monotanga from the clause in Section 3, stating that monotanga rendered by a candidate in respect of one or more of his or her matai titles within the territorial constituency in which the candidate intends to stand as a candidate. This contradicts the ethics and definition of what is mentioned in these acts, leading to a sense of inconsistency within these amendments, causing it to feel rushed and incomplete. There are also members of parliament, politicians, and matai who have challenged these new amendments and questioned its legitimacy in regards to the OEC, or Office of Electoral Commission,
You have 1 minute.
fairness and rationality for the current and future candidates, as noted by Lewatea Palata Iwao Schmidt. In the proof provided, we believe that religious monotanga should be part of the requirements for election candidacy. To support our claim, as Samoans, our way of life is deeply rooted and influenced in our religious beliefs and principles. From the lessons we learn as children to the negotiations made in village councils, all the way up to deliberations and decisions made in the upper echelons of government. It is all encompassed around our religious and Christian philosophies. This is how it is and always has been, further evident within the Constitution of Samoa, stating that we as a Christian nation are founded on God. Not only do we abide by our cultural values, but also our religious values. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I invite the second speaker of the affirmative side for the rebuttal as well as constructive speech.
Once again, Madam Chairperson, judges, opponents, timekeeper, and our audience. Before I state my stance, I would first like to rebut the point which the opposing team has formulated, which is cultural monotanga and religious monotanga are under the same bills and therefore should be included as a requirement for election candidacy. As we have stated, the term religious monotanga has been removed by the 2019 amendment and therefore should not be a requirement. The topic at hand states that religious monotanga should not be a requirement for election candidacy. We, the affirmative team, strongly agree, and we will support this statement with the following point. Spiritual affairs should not be corrupted by worldly matters. Religious monotanga, as defined by my colleague, is the giving of any monetary or tangible goods to the church as a service to the village through God. This form of service should be given only by a heart that is moved by the Holy Spirit and done out of love or free will. To give because of a law or because of a job requirement is a mockery of God. And for us to even dare pervert the things that are holy with our dirty politics should be enough to strike terror into the hearts of any God-fearing man. A Christian nation founded on God should know better than to mix religious matters with secular issues. Moreover, if so by law, a religious monotanga would be required for eligibility for parliament, then there is no sincerity in our benevolence. The offering which we will now give unto God is nothing more than a payment for a job. We are no better than the people who use the house of the Lord as a trading center. Furthermore, it is wiser and far more reasonable to have only a cultural monotanga as a necessity for candidacy. As the Samoan proverb goes, "Ole ala ile pule, ole tautua." The pathway to leadership is through service. A cultural condition for a cultural position. A matai can only lead after serving. In contrast, a religious monotanga should be given only out of the abundance of one's heart and should not quantify
You
one's
have 1 minute.
capacity to lead and serve our country. Otherwise, every Samoan can be a candidate for parliament. So therefore, we, the affirmative team, stand by this statement that religious monotanga should not be a requirement for electoral candidacy. Faculties.
Thank you. I call on the second speaker of the negative side for your team's rebuttal and presentation.
Before I state my point, I would like to acknowledge again the panel of judges, the opposing team, the Madam Chairwoman and the timekeeper, and as well as our fellow spectators. I would like to rebut first on what she said, that religious monotanga is not mockery to God or religion. This represents the embodiment of the religious support is given and is relied by members of parliament because they recognize the blessings bestowed upon them by religious leader bearing fruit due to their religious monotanga and their love of God. Although the candidate is voted into parliament to represent the constituency includes the religions and the different denominations within it. Not only this has become the norm for members of parliament and politicians in their opening speeches and introductory remarks in parliamentary government meetings to address and acknowledge or fa'alupe not only their Matayan's constituency, Itumalo, but also of the different denominations fa'afaitaulanga within their Itumalo. Which leads us to a second point. Religious monotanga should either be a requirement or a requirement exemption for candidate eligibility. This is a point we feel is a justification of the fairness and the neglect to future candidates and certain constituency and their angay whanua or cultural customs. To elaborate on this point, the discrimination towards the future candidates is directed towards the candidates of the recently appointed electoral constituency, which are filled by an independent urban seat set to be abolished in the next year's general election. Majority of the registered voters and residents of the new electoral constituency, according to the Samoan Census report in 2016, consist of people who are originally from rural villages and territorial constituency in which they are Matai and of serve cultural montage too, with a minority of 10% being original residents of that electoral constituency that holds titles and serve. However, if a migrant resident of these settlements were to run as a candidate for these electoral constituencies, he or she will be denied the eligibility for election as they do not serve and commit to a cultural montanga to their intended constituency, and their service only to their community and constituency is only through their religious montanga. Nevertheless, they do not have a cultural montanga to their village or territorial constituency where their Matai title is bestowed from. The solution where we feel is best is to have an exemption clause and to inclusive to the new electoral constituency where candidates are eligible through their cultural montanga and or religious montanga in the case they are where they are not Matais and intended constituencies. Thank you very much.
I now call on the third speaker on the affirmative side for your rebuttal as well as presentation of points.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson, panel of judges, my fellow opponents, members of the floor. The topic of our debate is religious monotanga should not be a requirement for election candidacy. The second point mentioned by the negative team has mentioned that religious monotanga is given with goodwill by the candidate and for bearing fruits. She also mentioned that it is unfair for future generation of candidates. I would like to rebut to this because I believe it is wrong. Firstly, religious monotanga, we can argue, you say that is given with goodwill, but we can argue that it is given because they have to, because it is a requirement for them to be a candidate. And also, how it affects our future generations of candidates. The change was made that allowed religious monotanga was specifically made to cater for only 2 urban constituency seats. Why should they be treated, why should they have special treatment above the other many candidates and of other constituencies? We have covered on why religious monotanga was established. This amendment not only affects the candidates looking for a seat in parliament, but also the perspective us voters have on these candidates. It is only right that we cast our votes not because a person's contribution to the church for the time frame given by law, but because of the personal aspects and value they have in the making decisions better for our country. Today, as third speaker, I will be talking to you about facts and facts alone. Does religious monotanga, or simply put, charitable works, make you more qualified to run for elections? The simple answer is no. As Electoral Commissioner stated in an interview with The Observer, you cannot be using church as a ticket into parliament. Furthermore, You do not have to look far for examples of why religious monotanga alone does not make you the best candidate. US President Donald Trump won the 2016 national elections by winning 80 to 81% of white evangelicals, despite his adversary Hillary Clinton winning 2.87 million more votes. Like many of us, Trump grew up in the Sunday school. He grew up in church. The day Trump launched his bid for presidency, his campaign team announced that Trump had donated 102 million in a 4-year period in a tool called political philanthropy. Or in more simple terms, using donations to influence the political process. Since becoming president and leader of one of the most powerful countries in the world, his decisions and policies have been unethical and undemocratic. And we know this because we see it all over the news. For example, family separation policy, which separated migrant children from their families while deporting their parents, mostly back to Mexico, and having them sleep on warehouse floors in just last year. On many occasions, Donald Trump has admitted that many of his policy positions were designed solely to please evangelical Christians, showcasing pure corruption. And for these reasons, we, the affirmative team,
Your
strongly
time is
reaffirm
up
that.
and you must stop. Thank you very much. I invite the third speaker of the negative side for your presentation and rebuttal.
I would like to acknowledge the panel of judges, chairperson, timekeeper, opposing side, and the audience. I would like to rebut on what you just said about the paramount chiefs within Samoa, the titles. Okay, in terms of cultural discrimination, the clause that states the disqualification of a candidate in the absence of their cultural monotanga automatically disqualifies Matais who intend to run for election, but the nature of his or her Matai title prevents them from serving a cultural monotanga. But in turn, where they receive monotanga pledges, this is a cultural ritual and nature of most paramount chiefs within Samoa. This case is evident in the village of Sili, in the territorial constituency of Palauli Falifa for the title Litanga Law, where a legal challenge was raised against Litanga Law Liunga Alai Lima, in which his title under cultural challenge was cultural stipulations does not give Monasanga, instead receives it. Although petition from his village and constituency were received to appeal overturning the court and OEC's decision to disqualify their candidate, they were denied this, even if the majority of the constituency believed that their candidate was able and disqualified to represent them in government. However, if there was a stipulation in which a candidate could be eligible via villages and Monasang with the exception of the Matai title being a negating factor, then the candidate would have been eligible within the degree of cultural stipulation and religious service. And leads to our third point is removing religious monotanga as a requirement will disregard religious representation within government. In the Constitution of Independent State of Samoa, written in 1960 on the 28th of October, reviewed and amended in 2015, the Constitution starts out in page 7 with opening statement. It goes like this: in the holy name of God, the Almighty, the ever-loving, whereas sovereignty over the universe belongs to the omnipresent God alone.
1 minute left.
And the authority to be exercised by the people of Samoa within the limits prescribed by God's commandment is a sacred heritage, whereas the leader of Samoa have declared that Samoa should be an independent state based on Christian principle and Samoa custom and tradition. This is clearly set out in stone that Samoa is a nation founded and based on God and on Christian principle, not only in the pretext of Christianity and religion itself, but it also foretold with Samoan culture and history in the story of Malietoa, seeking out the Babao Lunamalo, or glories and honor of his empire, in which Nafanua replied to him, Sa'ili lelangi seao lo malo. This was the foreshadowing of how religion was to play a big part of Samoa and its way of life, or more commonly known as the Fa Samoa. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the fourth and final speaker of the affirmative side for your summing up.
Before I summarize our arguments, I will respond to what the opposing team said about how religious monotanga allows candidates to serve the village through the church. So, again, I would like to remind you, what is the legal definition of monotanga? It's the service through the village council, not through the church. Say, for example, one village has 2 to 3 churches, as seen in most villages. Your religious monotanga will only go to that one church that you attend and will only benefit a few, the respected whaiwhiau, and that particular church. But according to the definition, monotanga is your service rendered through the village council, as I've mentioned a couple of times. So it should benefit the whole village and support village projects such as the maintenance of village water pools, building of village schools, and many others that could benefit everyone and not just a few people. And I would also like to rebut on how the speaker mentioned how we are a Christian nation, so we should separate cultural and religious monotanga. Isn't that the more reason why we need to separate our cultural and religious monotanga? It's because we are a Christian nation founded on God. We must understand the need to separate these issues so that the worldly matters do not interfere with spiritual affairs, or so that matais or chiefs can do their duties as matais and they do their duties as gospel preachers, as my second speaker has spoken about. So, in conclusion, we strongly agree that religious monotanga should not be a requirement for elective candidacy because of these reasons. First, legally, in pursuance to the Electoral Act of 2019, the definition of monotanga refers specifically to cultural and traditional services. It does not highlight any religious contributions or services. Therefore, religious monotanga is simply not legislated in law, and it cannot be enforced as a reason for eligibility requirements. It was only added to accommodate the tautua requirements of a monotanga, which, if it was crucial, would not have been removed in the first place. Meaning, if it's not involved, then it is not enforceable, it is not legislated, and it's not required under the law. And second, as my second speaker has mentioned, Samoa is founded on God. The inclusion of religious monotanga does not align with our religious practices. We are a Christian nation who do not need to serve our God because of a law or because it's a job requirement. We give out of love or free will. In saying this, we as Christians understand the need to separate cultural and religious issues so that matais don't take the roles of church leaders and vice versa. Or as the Bible says, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. And finally, religious monotanga provides a gateway for political philanthropy. In other words, any candidates can use donations or church contributions to further their own political agendas, regardless of how well qualified they are to serve their people. And as Afionga Faimalo Lemisio stated in an interview, you cannot be using church as a ticket into parliament. The way to heaven is very narrow, so we do not need to narrow it even more. And for all these reasons, the motion must stand that religious monotanga should not or never be a requirement for election candidacy. Whawhitai.
Thank you. I invite the fourth and final speaker of the negative side for your summary.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chairwoman. Once again, I would like to acknowledge the panel of judges, your Madam Chairwoman, timekeeper, our formidable opponents, as well as the spectators for today. First of all, to rebut on our opponent's second speaker's point, correction, it is, as you said, you said that we wanted it to be a standalone, requirement for election candidacy. No, us as a negative side, we wanted, apologies. We wanted the religious monotanga to be part of the election requirement for election candidacy. And on to the third speaker's point. In rebuttal, the third speaker said religious monotanga is a free ticket for the election candidates. Well, in rebuttal to that, we want to say that the religious monotanga is not a free ticket. It is a freedom of choice and the sense of the Whasamoa that is instilled in our culture and our government. This is practiced by our matais and leaders for the service of God, not to buy votes. Also, your philanthropy is based on foreign countries. Your facts and truth are not applicable and are rendered void in the nation of Samoa, as we have written in our own constitutions and our own Bill of Rights how things should be stated out. And to rebut on your last speaker's point, we do not take away from how religious and cultural monotanga does not, monotanga's lack of representation of the whole denominations in the constituencies. No, for that, we would like to say that the Amendment Act has been opposed and challenged publicly in the court in the beginning of this year in May. And as of the 1st of September, the proceeding and hearing was read, and as a result, the challenging politicians and pulinu'us, with the support of some of the members of parliament, have won the case and have withdrawn accusations, prompting order from the court for the government to have this amendment, alongside others, reviewed and revised to suit the equality and fair play required from the Electoral Amendment Act of 2019 for all candidates, current and future. And evidence is provided in the publication of the front page main article of the Samoa Observer on the 2nd of September. Now, this is a point that we feel is a justification of unfairness and neglect to the future. Now, in summary of our points, our first point, cultural monotanga and religious monotanga are two pillars of service that go hand in hand. This is proved and is evident in the Electoral Acts 1963 and the Electoral Act 2019. This is also evident and is well stated within our Samoa and the way of life and how we act as Samoan people. And for the second point, we feel that the justification of the unfairness and neglect to future candidates in certain constituencies and their anga I whanua, or their cultural customs. To elaborate on this point, the discrimination towards future candidates is directed towards candidates of the recently appointed electoral constituencies, which are filled by independent urban seats, where most of the villages whainga in these constituencies are inconsistent in validating a sense of community, where the only strong and prominent embodiment of the community in these constituencies are the religious affiliations which all residents belong to and have been known to contribute more from. And on to our first point, removing religious monotanga as a requirement will disregard religious representation within the government. To have religious monotanga ejected from eligibility requirements would be to cast aside and forget who we are as a nation. It would be the equivalent of the Samoan alanga upu, ai ulu tuana'i ta'isi, which means to forget or cast aside our primary benefactor in search of someone or something new, or in layman's term, to forget where you came from. As a civilization, if it were not for the church and its missionaries, we would not have been able to document our alphabet, let alone our language. And it was also the religious teachers that taught us about society, politics, and the outside world, all the things that without we would not have advanced as a civilization. It is also the religious aspects that we incorporate and are influential in our lives as Samoans in order to make the right choice and decisions, not only beneficial to us as a people, but also in alignment with our morals and ethics as humans. These are traits that would be forgotten and dissipated once religious monotanga is neglected as a requirement for eligibility and will eventually be introduced within the Parliament of Samoa, moving forward in the wrong direction.
Thank you very much. Give a big hand for both teams. Thank you very much for the performance, wonderful performance today. Thank you for your preparations. That brings to an end our debate, and we'll allow our judges to make their final judging and tallying their marks. In the meantime, we open the floor for any questions or comments. No questions, no comments? I'd like to note with a lot of happiness, I guess, the huge improvement that I'm noting in the level of preparation and the level of presentation, as well as the level of research that has gone into these debates. When one compares it to over 3 years ago, or maybe more, we've come a long way and we want to go a lot further. We want to climb a lot higher as far as the usefulness of our debates and as far as continuing improvement of your debating skills. Eleia, start over, Siri. Are you ready, judges? Yeah, okay. Tutasial minute, yeah. I thank you, students, for taking time from your classes, and maybe it's your in-between classes time, and making yourself available and to come here and participate, listen to the points on these very important topics. Au ngā tere nei mata upu. Tātou te whaalongolongo ia wale, tātou la tātou pālota. I now have received the scores from our judges, and here they are, the total scores. The total score for the School of Medicine is 517. The total score for TVET is 521, which means that TVET wins. Give a big hand. We thank the debating teams, again, for their preparation and presentation. And we thank you very much, judges, for availing of your very busy time. This brings to a conclusion this first round of debate for today. Whawhiteitere lava, we'll now get ready for debate number 2. Our second debate for today. I again welcome all of you who are able to be here for our debates this afternoon. I welcome our judges and our debating teams. The topic of this debate is SOE lockdown has done more harm than good. SOE lockdown has done more harm than good. Vai le pisa le tua fa mama. Each of you speakers on both teams will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes, except your fourth and final speaker, who will be given 5 minutes to present your summary. We have our timekeeper on my left, who will be keeping time, and will let you know that you have 1 minute left. Our timekeeper is Sungafi Nona Famanatu from the Faculty of Business and Entrepreneurship. She will let you know when you have 1 minute left in a piece of paper that says this, and when your time is up and you must stop, she rings the bell. Okay, we have our panel of judges here. Malolo Onasai judges. On my left is Sunga Martin Carey. He is the Director of Governance, Policy and Planning, the Division of the University. Next to him in the middle is Tofa Avalongo Tongi Tunupopo, our Chief Librarian. And on my far right is Sunga Rooney Mariner, lecturer with the Faculty of Arts. The language of our debate is English. To remind you, teams, as well as the judges, that no new points will be allowed to be introduced during your summation. Should you do that, the point will not be counted and you may be penalized. It's now my pleasure to introduce our debating teams. On my right is the affirmative side, representing the School of Nursing. Would you please introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon, honorable judges, members of the opposing team, chair lady and timekeeper. My name is Fasilinga Soti and I will be representing the nursing side.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emi Anastasia Pranmawalevao, and I'll be representing the School of Nursing.
Faftai.
Talofa, everyone. My name is Leslie Panapa, and I'll be your third representative for School of Nursing.
Okay. Turning over to the negative side, representing the Faculty of Science, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Madam Chairman, timekeeper, formidable opponents, our honorable judges, and the audience here in the floor. I am the first speaker of the Faculty of Science, debating on the topic from the negative side. SOE lockdown has done more harm than good for our country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Warm greetings, Madam Chair, honorable judges, timekeeper, our friendly opponents, and the audience. My name is Gloria Lupatung Tavai, and I represent the second speaker for the Faculty of Science.
Thank you.
Honorable judges, Madam Chairperson, timekeeper, fellow opponents, and the audience. My name is Eileen Williams, and I'll be representing the third speaker for the Faculty of Science. Thank you.
Thank you. Wishing good luck to both teams, I now invite the first speaker of the affirmative side for presentation of your points.
To date, Samoa remains to be without COVID-19, along with other countries of the Pacific. But it does not entirely mean that we have not felt or haven't been impacted greatly by the effects of this global pandemic. Samoa entered lockdown on March 21st with the declaration of a state of emergency. It was at that time the second state of emergency to be declared, only 3 months after the measles lockdown was lifted. A crippled economy, due to a prolonged lockdown will make more people vulnerable to all sorts of issues. Yes, coronavirus can be deadly, but trapping us in our homes is also costly to lives and livelihoods. The economy is suffering and so are the people. It's possibly affecting their mental health. Lockdown is coming as a cost. The restrictions are having a real effect on our happiness, health, and well-being, from joblessness, loneliness, and all the myriad knock-on effects. It's really important, by the way, that we don't get wrapped up in the idea that it is the economy versus the human life. The economy consists of people's lives in a very direct way. If you stop people from working, you make their lives worse. Their businesses go under, they fall behind on rent and mortgages. They most definitely cannot afford or buy the things they want and most certainly need. Which brings us to our first point, which is inconsistent messaging. In the beginning of the SOE, they have had clear messaging, but as it was extended and prolonged, it has become unclear. For example, social distancing. This is where it requires everyone to be 2 meters apart from each other, as it saves the breathing zone from being invaded. COVID-19 is a respiratory disease. And ways of spreading the disease can be by coughing or sneezing of the infected person to another.
You have 1 minute left.
All right. Social distancing signs are everywhere. However, not everyone is practicing this. With the SOE restrictions, and the messages are unclear, as it dilutes the seriousness of when we will be infected. Because what was the intent of SOE? If the point of SOE was for people to practice things that saves themselves when they're not doing anything, then what is the point? Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the first speaker of the negative side for your side's rebuttal and presentation of points.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, honorable judges, our formidable opponents, and the spectators. The topic states here that lockdown or COVID-19 has done more harm than good. I want to say something about the first speaker has mentioned, the economy of Samoa. The first thing you want to worry about is money and food and drink. The life of a person is not up for discussion, because economy can be recovered, but your life, you live once. You cannot get it from a store or a supermarket. Also, you mentioned having no jobs. We have jobs, in the name we get money. So which is more preferable to you? Is it your priority to get more money or your priority to care for your family in time of needs, in these times of troubles? And this comes to my main point. This lockdown has awakened the humankind. We have been living our lives in structured time. We have been spending 24 hours of our life, 8 hours to work, 8 hours to rest, and another 8 hours to get up and ready. But given the lockdown, people are confined to their home. They are awakened. They have been struck by the COVID-19. This awakening enables the human mind to be creative, to be innovative, to be inventive. And that's the main use of this lockdown. We can see art students being cashiers in stores. We can see fishermen being collecting rubbish. This lockdown has bring those human beings to their rightful talent. They have been working the land. Farmers have been working the land. We have plenty of food. Given the statistical by the Ministry of Agriculture, we have a boost in agriculture production. Trees have been given outside to families. We have been living our life from the moment and our ancestor came to this island. We didn't have money. We just have food. Lockdown has unstructured our time, because if we live in structured time, we lack the creativity. And if we live in unstructured time, we be creative of ourselves. We have been connected to our cell phones. We have been connected to the grid. But the lockdown has given us a chance to think about what is more important. Is it the money, is it the food, or the life of your loved ones? It has protected people within a society, given Samoa a population over 190,000. Wuhan, China has suffered more than 199,000 deaths. So is it more important to think about the economy? From 1918, from the influenza to this day, it has a long time gap. We have enough money from that timeline. We just have a COVID-19 for about a year now. Maybe it could recover next year. But think about the life of the people of Samoa is important here, and your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the second speaker of the affirmative side for your side's rebuttal and presentation of points.
Thank you for the chance. You are right about that side of the lockdown hasn't really done more harm to our country. However, yes, our loved ones are really important to us and as well as our lives, but do you see any COVID patients here in Samoa? Literally, our governments have locked down our borders. That's one thing that's for safety of our country. But our economy has literally been affected very badly. While the restrictions introduced by the government in Samoa with the connection with the COVID-19 pandemic that saved lives and also kept the country virus-free, but they had also had a great dramatic impact on the country's small economy and limited livelihood opportunities. Yes, in those days we've had farming, agriculture, like we were very much rich, but those were those days. This is the modern days. This is where money is important and money could also save lives. How can you buy medications from the hospital if you don't have money? How can you travel from all the way from the rural areas to the hospital, the main hospital, if you have an accident or probably a serious case if you don't have money for transportation? Especially when most families do not have any cars, where they rely on public transportations, where in fact social distancing is not really practiced in right now. As you can see on the buses, literally you can see that all the chairs are full. That's why our main point here is income and also the food securities that are happening in Samoa. Income, where children are now employed to sell their produce, and also a lot of adults have lost their jobs, where they're like only 20% have been able to supplement lost income. Also 71% are having trouble where servicing loans and also debts, where almost half of the Samoans have at least one household member who has lost a job. Who knows, maybe that one family only have one person who's working for their families to supply income for the daily necessities. And also, since there are a lot of unemployed people, for example, the tourism people, they are really not certain whether they're gonna get their jobs or not. Thank you for the chance.
Thank you. I call on the second speaker of the negative side for your rebuttal as well as presentation.
Once again, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Madam Chair, the honorable judges, and the audience. Opponent speaker 2, you asked that, is there any COVID-19 cases in Samoa? You're right, there's nothing. But it's better to be safe than sorry. Now, going back to the topic, as though a lockdown has done more harm than good for our country, I strongly oppose the idea of the given topic. Why?
because the SOA lockdown saves lives. So, what is so harmful with implementing a life-saving strategy to cope with the pandemic? My point exactly is that SOA lockdown ensures health safety. It requires people to restrain from large gatherings in order to cease the movements of viral infection. At the same time, people are encouraged to practice proper hygiene and live a healthy lifestyle. Think about the measles outbreak last year. 83 people died because the government delayed implementing SOA lockdown. For the COVID-19, given the mode of transmission is from person to person through respiratory droplets produced when the patient sneezes or coughs. So is it safe to just let people roam around partying and doing whatever they want? No. But with the SOA lockdown, it prevents every possibility of infection transmission by forcing people to stay in their own house and avoid contacts with others. According to Dr. John Prooks, a recent study by the National Informatics Center, or NIC, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention concluded that the COVID-19 can persist in the air and on surfaces for hours, up to even days. So this virulent factor makes its chains of transmission more sharp and fatal. Dr. Isaac Kainai and his co-workers released the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report on April 8, 2020. The report findings reveal that COVID-19 spreads faster in large gatherings. In its conclusion, Dr. Kinai himself emphasized that staying home and avoiding large gatherings are the keys to reduce the spread of COVID-19, which again supports the idea of the SOA lockdown. Moreover, during a lockdown, people have become widely aware and concerned with maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Hand washing has become a daily habit. Hand sanitizers is everywhere, which is not something that was usually there. People are also keen on learning how to produce their own. Also, during lockdown, people realized that health is wealth. So now people are eating more healthy, nutritious food at home. Unlike when they go out, they would usually go for fast food or junk food, which lacks very important nutrients.
Thank you very much. I invite the third speaker of the affirmative side for your side's rebuttal and presentation of points.
The measles outbreak of 2019 and the COVID-19 restrictions are related. That the government of Samoa enforced are expected to lead to a negative gross domestic product growth rate for 2019-2020 of 3.3%, a projection that may further worsen as the global and regional lockdown continues beyond the second half of 2020. So the measles outbreak, the reason why people are not responding to the restrictions and the lockdown is because the information has diluted and everyone has not taken it seriously because it has been enforced, it has pressured people too much that the restrictions have not influenced people to be safe. So my point is, coming from the view of a student, the SOE has done more harm than good in academic terms of students' learning and access to learning. Firstly, the SOE encourages online learning, but the online learning that enables the student and the tutor to contact through the educational platform, such as the Moodle that is being created. The problem with that, yes, everyone is able to access Moodle, but the problem with that is that there is no connection, there is no interaction between the students and the tutor. Secondly, learning also needs practice. We need exposure to the environment. We need experience to the environment as it is reality. Classrooms and learning is not the reality. It is practice of what we are learning. That is the reality. But the SOE restrictions, the lockdown, it prevents students from going out into the environment and being exposed to the environment. For instance, the laboratory experiments that you guys have every Friday, those cannot be done from home
through online. Not everyone has access to internet and not everyone
You have 1
understands the
minute.
English language used by the educational platform. Another thing, the SOE stimulated the economy, causing a fluctuation in both health or wealth in terms of financial hardship and accelerates the conflict of internal relationships, such as the platform that was introduced by Tangata Pacific on the 29th of August. It was made because, yes, sexual abuse and violence was already there, but the lockdown has made it more worse for them. And not all families have lands to work and plants. Most rely on money to provide for food because not all lands are customary. Some are government-owned land. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on the third speaker of the negative side for the side's rebuttal and presentation of points.
Thank you, Madam Chair, timekeeper, honorable judges, and our fellow opponents. I'd like to rebut to what your first speaker said about the economy. You mentioned that the economy is crippled, but is it crippled? Are we starving? Is Samoa starving? Are we struggling to find food? Shops are still open, and I don't think so. I don't think that the lockdown has done more harm to our economy. But lockdown has stimulated local tourism. It also stimulated agriculture sector, like my fellow colleagues said. I want to rebut also to what the second speaker said. You said something about, is there any COVID cases in Samoa? No, there's no COVID, but the government is aware now, after the measles epidemic, that money cannot buy a life. We should not worry about the economy more than our lives, the people's lives. And so I come to my point. So we fully disagree on the given topic because evidence shows that SOE lockdown has done more good than harm. This leads to my first point, the positive relationship between the lockdown and on the environment. Dr. Maria Naira of World Health Organization stated that air pollution kills 7 to 9 million people each year, which is less than the COVID-19. 7 to 9 million people a year, far more than malaria, HIV, and tuberculosis combined. And over 90% of the world's population lives in places where air pollution is above World Health Organization guidelines. However, when the world was on lockdown in early April, carbon emissions were down by 17%, according to the research conducted by a group of scientists in the journal Nature Climate Change, compared to average daily emissions last year. My second point is ocean pollution. Each year, billions of pounds
You have
of
1
trash
minute
and
left.
pollutants enter the ocean, according to a study by NOAA. Ocean pollution increases ocean acidification, marine life degradation due to oil spills, lockdown has minimized these types of pollution. Therefore, lockdown has not only given us a chance to ensure the health and safety of people, acts as a wake-up call for everyone, and also, but most importantly, it gave the environment a chance to bounce back. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the fourth and final speaker of the affirmative side for your side summing up. And you have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Firstly, I would like to rebut on the point that was given from the negative side. It was rather a question, life of loved one or money and food. Not everyone is entitled to lands where we can plant crops, grow crops, have farms. So they rely on their daily income, weekly or fortnightly, from these jobs, and which is one of the effects of SOE lockdown that has impacted our country, which is the loss of jobs. So without the job, there is no income, no money. Without the money, there will be no food. Without the food, we cannot live, we cannot consume healthily, as we can say. And without healthy living, we cannot have life. Another point I'd like to repeat on is transmission. It is correct that it can be transmitted on surfaces by sneezing, coughing, invading the breathing zone of the uninfected person. And staying at home saves lives. However, it brings me down to my point of inconsistent messaging. We have been on lockdown since March. It has been 6 months already. And if this prolongs and goes on, it can desensitize the information and cuts down on the severity of the message that we are trying to portray to the people of Samoa in any time we are infected by COVID-19. An example of when the government were telling the church ministers that they have the responsibility of practicing social distancing in churches. Maybe they are practicing social distancing in churches, but as we can see, we are not practicing social distancing in school. In supermarkets, they are not practicing social distancing. The nightclubs, the banks, everywhere. So we have the information, but however, it is not practiced well and it is inconsistent. Are we struggling economically? Yes. However, money cannot buy lives, but without money, you can't provide necessities that you need to survive in this lifetime. Which also brings us back to our point of income that is very useful, that SOE has done more harm than good because we have loss of jobs, so we are unable to provide for our families. Child employment has increased as well. We are unable to push through with hospital visits that we usually do and are unable to afford treatments. We are not, public transportation were not accessible as well. So when there is any state of emergency during at that time, we don't have much choices. So I'll leave you with the question. If COVID-19 came to Samoa, seeing as we don't have any cases, and we have been so desensitized to the message, will we be able to change our behavior in time? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I invite the fourth and final speaker of the negative side for its summing up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, timekeeper, honorable judges, and our formidable opponents. It was a nice debate with the nursing. I tip my hat to the nurse and doctors risking their life fighting for COVID-19. And you here, sit here, all worried about money and economy. What if our economy crumbled to the earth? Would you risk your life for free as you are here for 4 years to care, to nurture, to be with the patient? You are a plug to the patient. The doctors go everywhere, but you guys, or the nurses, be there for the patient. So are you telling me that you are working for the money? You, the first speaker, you mentioned, what if COVID-19 come to Samoa? We are not practicing social distancing. That is because it is our culture. We all like to get together. Given the 1918 influenza, what did people do? The government said Samoan were the cause of the widespread of the virus. Why? Because when someone's sick, Samoan culture go, oh, we give them food, let's wash his head. But it's a contagious disease. We cannot change who we are, but we can practice makes perfect. You, the second speaker, you mentioned people having a hard with transportation. What if you should be, when you're sick at home, in lockdown, transportation been seized, and you cannot come to the hospital. And that's the main idea for SOE lockdown. You are confined to your home. You have the mentality to budget example, if you are a student, you come here to the NUS. Let's say, for example, you come from Malipata. It costs like 10 tala to come here to Apia, and then a 1 tala here. And let's forget the money you eat here. And NUS, they cost 10 tala, and that's about $22. And then you will look at the week, and then 7 times 2, that's $44. Imagine wasting that money. And you, the first speaker, mentioned pressure. When you sit in school, when you have a 2-hour lecture, you want to go outside, you want to play, you want to touch the cell phone. Well, Moodle has done easier for you. You have the platform, you have time flexibility. You can go watch a movie, eat a food, drink, and then you come, sit your test, have your assignment done. And that's the main idea of lockdown, making our life easier. Think about what is more important to you guys, our health. We haven't been practicing hand washing. We just don't see the hand washing as washing with soap. But now, as social media spread all over the world, giving us an idea of how dangerous this virus is, people in Samoa started to practicing. When someone coughs beside you, you want to move away. And that's a practice. That's the idea of healthy and safety. Isolate the people. The miso, given for example, our government was too late to act. What happened? Miso came with a number, 86 children who have not seen their future. Their parents have not seen their future. But now, the government has acted on those mistakes they made. Now, a member of parliament, and you stand up to the parliament and and challenge the speaker of the house, say Samoa is a very powerful country. Why? Because they acted first. They locked their borders. They isolate the people in their country to prevent disease from killing you guys. And also for the environment. In Wuhu, China, we can imagine the air quality has been reformed. We've seen air quality being cleaner right now. Why? Because we have seized airplanes. An airplane, it burns about 3,000 tons of fuel per day. And that's how many flights per day? 3. And calculate that 3,000 tons of fuel we are burning. Imagine living in a world where we breathe only nitrogen oxide. Now we have Sunday block all traffics. We cease that CO2 emission. We are in the forefront of climate change. This lockdown has put some measure to it, because a small work to be done would be a great impact to our whole world. We are contributing to that.
You have 1 minute left.
And also, my points is that it's the family togetherness. We come together, we be there as a family, spend more time as a family, because we do not spend more time in our family. We have most of our time scrambled in works. We have structured time as now, but what now? People are come to their home, spending the time together with their loved ones before the COVID-19 can come to this country. And that's more important than money and food. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thank both teams for your presentation of your views for your respective sides this afternoon. Thank you for your preparation. On both sides. But still, we note we're very glad to note that you have prepared, you have done some preparation on both sides. What I really like about this is whether your English is correct or not, you just go for it. So, you have that confidence, your English can be corrected, but, if you're going to be in a debate, you go for it. But make sure your points link together. Anyway, I thank you, both teams. I thank the judges very much. And they are finishing their task And so I open the floor for any comments, any questions on this topic, this very important topic. Are we still on lockdown? Oh, okay. Orang mera yele lockdown time ni. But when the lockdown was first imposed, there was strict observation of all the rules and regulations, including the lockdown of the schools. But as we go along, and we've been practicing our social distancing, and all the instructions, we are really, really prepared. But we are very fortunate that our government's move on prevention of the entry has been very successful so far. But it's out, a lot of jobs that, a lot of people do not have their jobs. But at the same time, I've never seen so much creativity in baking that I'm seeing now. Just about everyone that I know is baking and selling their cupcakes and their, or brownies or cake. There's that kind of creativity that has arisen and has taken the place of jobs, bringing in additional income to the family, especially to those families whose members have lost their jobs. Anyway, I have now been handed the judges' judging, and here it goes. The School of Nursing scored a total of 426 points, and the Faculty of Science scored a total of 500 points, which means that the debate is won by Faculty of Science. Again, thank you both teams. Thank you very much, judges, for your time for both debates. And thank you very much, students, for taking time out to come and take part in this important annual activity organized and coordinated by the NUSSA Executive. Faculties Media. Yeah, Faculties Media for supporting this effort by the students to film and put them on the platform. Thank you all. That brings us to a conclusion of the debates for today. We'll see you on Thursday. Faculties judges, we'll see you on Thursday.